On this day, in Seventh-day Adventist history, January 3, 1875, during the last part of December 1874, a very severe epidemic of influenza had swept through the land, and many in Battle Creek were prostrated. One after another, the White family came down with the sickness and rallied. Ellen White was the last to be attacked. After 3 or 4 days of the usual run of the disease, she expected to recover, but she did not. Rather, she grew worse, and the sanitarian physicians feared that she was in danger of pneumonia. They urged that she be brought without delay to the sanitarium for treatment. Her illness came at a most inopportune time, for there were important meetings to be held. James was distressed at the thought of her not being able to bear her testimony before the members of the Bible Institute, the Battle Creek Church, and the many visiting brethren who had gathered to witness the dedication of the college. James felt that he could not endure the thought of this representative body of Adventists being deprived of her testimony, and he decided to follow the course taken so many times in former years when he had called the elders of the church to pray for Ellen White's recovery. Ellen was brought down from the sick room and into the parlor. She was seated in a large armchair, warmly wrapped into blankets. Uriah Smith and J.H. Wagner had come from the review office with James to unite with him in prayer. Elder Wagner prayed. Elder Smith followed in prayer, and then James White prayed. It seemed heaven was very near to them. Then Ellen White undertook to pray. In a hoarse, labored voice, she uttered 2 or 3 sentences of petition. Her son, Willie C. White, writes, "Suddenly her voice broke clear and musical, and we heard the ringing shout, 'Glory to God!' We all looked up and saw that she was in vision. Her hands were folded across her breast. Her eyes were looking intently upward, and her lips were closed. There was no breathing, although the heart continued its action. As she looked intently upward, an expression of anxiety came into her face. She threw aside her blankets, and stepping forward, she walked back and forth in the room. Wringing her hands, she moaned, 'Dark, dark, all dark, so dark.' Then, after a few minutes of silence, she exclaimed with emphasis and a brightening of her countenance, 'A light, a little light, more light, much light.' This we understood afterward, when she told us that the world had been presented to her as enshrouded in the mist and fog of error, of superstition, of false tradition, and of worldliness. Then, as she looked intently and with distress upon the scene, she saw little lights glimmering through the darkness. These lights increased in power. They burned brighter and brighter, and they were lifted higher and higher, each one lighting other lights, which also burned brightly until the whole world was lighted. Following her exclamatory marks, regarding the lights, she sat down in her chair. After a few minutes, she drew 3 long, deep breaths. And her natural breathing resumed. Her eyes rested upon the company that had been assembled for prayer. James, knowing that after vision everything looked strange to her, knelt by her side and spoke into her ear, saying, 'Ellen, you have been in a vision.' 'Yes,' she said, her voice sounding far away, as though she was speaking to someone in another room. 'Were you shown many things?' James asked. 'Yes,' she replied. 'Would you like to tell us about them now?' he asked. 'Not now,' was her response. So the company was dismissed, and she went back to her room. That evening, Ellen White went to the meeting at the church. In answer to the prayers offered, she had been fully and permanently healed. Her cold and harshness was gone. Her weakness was replaced with vigor, and she bore her part during the special meetings that were held for the several evenings. She spoke for 3/4 of an hour. In her remarks, she spoke with great emphasis upon the necessity of our taking a broader view regarding the work that God had given us to do. She dwelt upon the necessity of laying much broader plans for the education of home and foreign workers. She said that our movements in sending workers to foreign fields were altogether too slow and inadequate. She told us that in vision she had seen in many parts of the world companies studying the Bible, finding there the promises of God's soon return to redeem His people, and also the facts regarding the sacredness of the seventh-day Sabbath. She saw little companies here and there, keeping the Sabbath without knowing that there were any other companies of Sabbath keepers in the world. She told us that as we heard of such companies, it would be our duty to send experienced ministers to labor among them, teaching them the way of truth more fully. During the years as our work progressed, We have found in many lands just such companies as those described by Mrs. White at that meeting. Not long after this meeting, we learned of a company of Sabbath keepers in Germany. After we heard of them, it was some time before we were able to send a teacher among them, and already the results of dissension had begun to manifest themselves. However, the earnest labors of one who had long experience as an Adventist minister brought a degree of unity and harmony. And from among them, the young men in this company, some of them have entered the field as ministers. There was, as we learned later, another marked instance of a company of Sabbath keepers being raised up in Australia at this time. 10 years later, when she visited the new printing houses in Basel, Switzerland, she would recognize the press room as one of the places that she had seen in this vision. On this day, January 3, 1875, Ellen White had visions of a printing press similar to this.